America, talk to me, Lauren Collin, and let us go beyond what you believe to better understand why you believe anything. I am not here to debate. There are plenty of places for speaking right past one another, nor am I here to judge. Here on the We Unite, We Win podcast, User Generated America series, I will speak to anyone willing to give me an hour of their time to share their clearly stated morals, ethics, religious beliefs, or lack of, and views on humanity that inform their personal approach to culture, politics, and government. The aim of the UGA series is not to change anyone's mind. I am doing this in the hopes that you, the listener, will join me in putting aside your assumptions and listen to the guest for an hour. If the conversation gets you to ask a question about yourself and about your own beliefs and why you believe anything, all the better. I am excited to always be bringing you more of this content. Please consider supporting this work and becoming a paying member at $8 per month by visiting weunitewewin.com. Today's guest is Ariel Vergez. Ariel is a professional artist and community organizer. He harnesses the power of storytelling in public spaces to help neighborhoods express their desires and hopes. Ariel celebrates nature's journey from dark to light. Listen as Ariel shares with me where his beliefs come from and how his journey shapes who he is today. Let's chat with Ariel Vergez. I am joined by Ariel Vergez. He is a friend of my partner's. He is an amazing artist and community activist. He has also had a background in product design. He's been all over, but I'm not going to tell you where he's been all over. He is. Welcome, Ariel.
How's it going, sir?
It is going well. Sure? Yes. Well, let's dive right in. Give us your brief background, your brief bio, maybe the where you were born, the where you've been, the where you are now. If there's anything you want to share that makes Ariel,
yeah,
please share it.
Sounds good. Yeah, we can start in the beginning, jump to the now, and then go to the middle or something weird. Dominican born, raised in Miami, and went to school or college in Cleveland. And during that time, was doing industrial design, was able to work with Hasbro and Takara as internships. So I got to go to Japan, design some Transformers. And then right as we were graduating, like, do we work in the toy industry or where do we go? And my wife and I, girlfriend at the time, we both had job offers and we're like, hey, if we're going to take this serious, this is it. Like, do we pick the job or do we pick the relationship? So we just had a little compact and it was wherever the first person gets a job, as long as it's hot 3/4 of the year. And she got a job first in LA. And I was in the Bay looking around for stuff. And when I came to visit, like, LA culture is such a gig economy that, coming by for a visit, just there for 2 weeks for a holiday, it's like, it's just got freelance work. We started jamming. Next thing you know, I just never left,
How long were you in Los Angeles?
Yeah, LA, we were there for 12 years. During that time, like when I was in Frogtown and Highland Park, I was part of an art collective, Nomad. And that was another like huge like jump in getting back into arts hardcore. And, thank you, Damon Robinson. He's a beast, 3rd generation printers. Like, I skipped 10 years of learning the hard way just by being able to come into like his system of printing, meshing, silk screening, and that, like the lifestyle of LA, apparel got me back into art and got me into like not so much on tees, more posters, and then it was like stencils, and then it's like I painted a wall one time and I was like, this is it, like this is it,
I am fortunate to have two of your pieces in my home, and they're gorgeous. They're amazing. And were you still always stoking that artist in you, or was it not really until this later part in your life that it,
Well,
like you
the
said,
reason
hit
I
the
went
wall? It's like, bam.
the reason I went into industrial design specifically was because, you know, I still had really pragmatic parents. Like, you know, they had to take on extra jobs, remortgage the house to put me through art school, right? So I was like, I'm going to get a motherfucking job, you know? So what's the best scenario? And at that time, that's when like the new Star Wars or like episodes 1, 2, and 3 came out right in 2000. So at that time, it was revealed that a lot of the designers for that were actually industrial designers. This was before there was like an entertainment design, because that series of movies, the early 2000s, is what really catalyzed that as its own field. But it was like, if you look back, you know, even like Blade Runner, you know, some of these, it's like a lot of product designers, Sid Mead being like a really prominent one. And you know, I skipped over that. I went to like CCS for a semester. So I went to CCS for a semester, which had like a huge route, you know, to Sid Mead. And then when I went to Cleveland Institute of Art, my foundation's Viscom teacher, you know, he had heritage to Sid Mead. So it's like from that culture, you know, of like really pragmatic industrial design principles, when it was still Canson and vellum and markers and turpentine and like, you know, like still a little messy, like the cleanest version of messy you can get. That was my lineage. So I was like, hey, if I can keep drawing, you know, that means that it's something less chaotic or more steady. You know, I was going to go for that. But at the end of the day, I always said like art was my first love, right? You know, and then this was like the pragmatic choice. And it was interesting because all the design, the industrial design, and the flexibility of the form languages was the reason that my career went the path it did. My heroes were like Dali and Leonardo da Vinci, and I fell in love with Dali because of his like multiple imagery within an image, you know, so an image within an image within an image. I did this project when I was in Miami with the Museum of Graffiti, and it was you know, it was like American history, and then each letter represented a decade. And it was really cool working on a mural with a group where like, hey, everyone took aspects of the letter and of the people in it, and they told this cool story, and it was like really beautiful. But in that time, it was like, look back at graffiti and glyphs again, you know, for as like, hey, that's like a really dope medium or dope form vocabulary to try and fit things in and to fit it into things, right? So one of the interesting things from that is you know, if you can claim the letter, then you claim words, and you claim words, you claim images. So it's interesting how the letter automatically creates a system to get to the logos, right? It's like the word automatically gets to image. You know, it's like we look at AI now, we're like, the painting, that's the part that they'll never be able to do, right? And it was actually like, as soon as a language model was created, the first thing it could do was an image, like easily, you know?
Right.
It was like, actually, if you got language, you got image, right? Because language is created to describe what we see, you know, and to implant an image in your mind. It's like this little sound can implant images, bring back memories, and activate your creativity, right? Your imagination. So that's been really interesting. Like the more I get into letters, the more refined my images become.
This is an excellent bridge into our kind of bigger discussion of your philosophy, your foundational ethics, what drives you as a parent, partner, someone who's worked professionally, who still works professionally, as an artist and activist. As a human being, do you think about pursuing and maximizing your happiness?
Not in the sense of happiness, like feel good. There's what's the there's a sense of, it's like the integrity of hard work, right? Like that. There's like a specific word, like the English language is like, it's broad but very muddy. Like words can mean anything. Like in the ancient, you get into like, especially like the Hebrew, like the words are very specific, right? So it's like, it's this idea of a steady, long-term fulfillment, right? So fulfillment trumps happiness. Happiness as the emotion, right? So one of the big things I've been pushing when even like telling the stories that we're doing now is the idea of, and this comes with like my partner that we do a lot of work with Rishi, which is more like image-based storytelling. And it's, the emotion is, the conglomerate of all these feelings and ideas and memories or trauma even. And we can't necessarily control that, like somebody says something that reminds you of a deceased family member. Is like, you can't control all of that energy. But what you can control is your attitude, right? So, and then I've just been playing like the word games with it. And like the simple one is like, hey, you can do something for me. Like you can give me money, for example. And I can grumble, right? Because that's the attitude I chose. It's like, oh, you gave so little or blah, blah. Or you're coming from a place of this. You can grumble or you can be grateful, right? At the end of the day, like what you did didn't change, but my attitude changed with it. And with that, it's like, that's your energetic response, right? Is it a positive as in, plus, or is it a negative as in minus, right? Like the mathematical energy equivalent, not necessarily the connotative. I mean, it is a connotative also. But more to say, just looking at it just scientifically, right? It's like, hey, I'm going to respond positively to these things. So with that, the happiness is more, I'll focus more on the fulfillment, where I want to make sure that I'm doing something that's fulfilling, and that, brings meaning to the things that I do.
Have you always been after fulfillment, or is it something that was also a journey? You said earlier on, actually a few times now, about, a pragmatism. Even your answer into that fulfillment was having the long-term view of it. Were you born that way? That's just who Ariel always was. Was it informed by your parents and your experience as an immigrant in this country? Or again, did it change over time?
It's like, you could answer that in like a billion different ways. You could be like, oh, it's because I'm a 9, or it's like, or, it's like, I'm a scientific artist, or, all these other things. At the end of the day, I think there was always something in my brain wiring where it's a right brain, left brain thing, right? And it's like, I want full creativity. I also want scientific, mathematical precision, right? And then knowing those boundaries so that I can have freedom in the mix. So even with the program we're teaching right now with No Pressure, No Diamonds, what was wild is, like in general, my style is usually a lot looser, a little bit more flowy, and, not big on like overworking a piece. For the most part, a lot of the art things I was doing was on top of other graphic works or other product design work. So I had limited time and had to just be really efficient, right? So for a long time, it was about efficiency. And it was more because of a lack of time. And then, one of the things through No Pressure No Diamonds is, as we had done this show, we were trying to say, hey, how can we let go of the personal ego and adopt like an artist group ego, so that we can, similar to how like you get a branding guideline or anything else in like design, or how can we set up parameters so that within those parameters, each of us had full reign to do our thing, or within these type parameters. And when we did it, it was amazing seeing like, really develop artists, and then also like new artists or up and coming artists, and be able to follow those parameters. And together we created a really holistic show that, although you can see like different technical quality things, and as a whole, it was a really powerful installation. So with that was, how can we now really break down that process and make that a tool that we can teach people? And we opted, my background again is industrial design. So I'm like, biomimicry, sustainable, design thinking, design philosophy, human-centered design. So with that, it's like took the artistic side of it and was like bioartistry. And it was like, hey, how can we create in a way that's that mirrors what nature, the wisdom of nature, right? So even in the painting, it's like, how does the eye work? And it's like, hey, it goes from blurred to focus, and just the main thing that your cone is focused on, the tip of the cone is focused on, is really sharp. So when we took that into account and we went through this process, we're like, all right, we're going to start with the flat black, because that did a bunch of really cool stuff. Where like it brought in the silhouette. It did something with like different gleams and reflections. And it really added a three-dimensional aspect to the piece, where you can come from the side and you see the glare, but because of the flat black background, you still get the silhouette of the image. So even when you can't see the image is still there, which is really cool. So then as you come into the front of it, it does this almost like you're looking at a hologram. It's just like, coming out and like coming to you, right? So it was really interesting, starting from the void, and then we're coming to light. So the idea is that, hey, we're painting the light, and we're going to go from the dark to the mids, to the mid lights, to the lights, to the light lights, to the highlights, right? And then at the very end, it's like highlights and reflections. And in that process, what's wild is like, hey, for each step, it's a smaller brush. With each step, it's more detailed. And what was wild is, when broke down the process, did a little test run, and then I went through the process, like beginning to end. And the natural thing that happens is that you get a really sharp image, or, more layman, right? It's like a hyper realistic image, that actually feels natural, because you have a really crispy focal point, and then it goes into a soft focus and then a void. So the natural route of that process was like getting really detailed. And what that let us do is again, going back to that freedom in the middle, so, hey, this process is so that you can understand, a mechanics of color and light, so that you're not limited by the technical, and now you can choose exactly what you want to do, because you can be fully blurred image, which is like, Monet, impressionistic, Baroque, right? To like full, Renaissance, Caravaggio type, right? And then once you have that process, it's like you can really break down each step, and you can just isolate the steps. And it's gotten to the point that I've been loving the blurred image so much. I'm like, dude, I just leave it at the blurred image, and then I just add a little bit of highlight in a certain spot,
Your description of that process sounds also very contemplative of the human experience, from darkness into light, ultimately shadow and reflection. Was that purposeful that this
This is the
human
thing,
reflection came out, or was it part of, again,
when
like,
you follow the wisdom of nature, the capital T truth comes out. It's like I can give you that 6-step process, and you're like, those were the first 6 days of creation in the Bible. Those are it's like you can just go through, because capital T truth of this system, when you follow the wisdom of nature, it works. And it works because it works. You'll find it in everything, right? So now the rocks will stream this process, right? Because at the end of the day, it's pointing to the process.
as someone who lives between the and exists between and represents both the artist and the scientist in a world where most people are probably much more artistic or much more scientific, or maybe neither, how do you feel those lessons of someone who lives in both of them can be brought forth for everyone?
It's just not for everyone. And that's okay. It's like it's just not for everyone. And it's a very unique place, because I can be with artists, and they'll say, hey, like, very pragmatic, or like, you're creating too many parameters. It's like, or I could be with business developers, like, dude, you're so creative, but you can also like talk strategy. So it just really depends on if they see the value in it. And it's really an echo on their own beliefs.
Let's dive into more of your own beliefs. So do you have a framework for moral philosophy and ethics? Does it come out of things like utilitarianism or Epicureanism or modernism or a religious background or a combination of all of the above? Or is it just something that's your foundation, just is something that resides in you? Where does that come from for you? And how has it developed over time?
For me, I mean, there's been a lot of interesting things throughout the years. But if I were to break it down, like, really abstractly, for me, it's always been really intuitive. And I remember when I spoke to my wife, then girlfriend, or almost girlfriend. I don't know, it's like a weird first few months where nothing was said, but But one of the things I was describing was, this intuition of, it's like, hey, there's intuition you have, and that's, like, spirit, that's God letting you know, hey, something's up. And then talking about, we all just focus on our thing. That's all those little things will add up together. And then my wife was like, you just described the Holy Spirit and the body of Christ. And I was like, I was raised Catholic, and, I was like, I don't need to get into it, but, I was like, oh, interesting. So started going to church with her. And, what was wild is, like, my whole time in Catholicism was like, we learned all these different prayers, but they never like gave us a book, the Bible, right? And we're like, read it, and like, she got me a Bible. I was like, wait, I know the Bible exists, but I never thought about, like, I could read it, because it was like, that's for the guy up there to read, So when I was reading it, it was really interesting. The thing that really stuck out more than anything was, like, seeking and you should find. And that idea of, like, this is a private journey where you keep seeking. And I remember in LA, when we were in that little studio, I would have to take 3 buses to get to work. And I remember, I had this, like, routine where I was like, hey, the first ride of the bus, I'm going to read the Bible. The second ride, I'm going to read some random book. And the third ride, I'm going to sketch. And then I do the inverse on the way back, right? So during that 3-year span, I was reading like 13 books a year, read the Bible like twice a year, and like filled up like 4 sketchbooks. And because of that, like, that routine of, like, just being in it, it's like, I can come back to a passage, and just because I grew, now different things of that passage are sticking out. Like I remember the first time like I read the Bible after I just had my daughter, right, Eva. There were passages where it was like I never understood that this was a parent talking to his kids passage, because never would have crossed my mind in that way. And it just goes to show, like, hey, you seek and you'll find, and the more that you can delve into the word, for me anyways, like the more it opened up. And one of the things that like really drove like the scientists back in was when I read Hebrews 4 for the first time in a while, but like just through a new lens of like going into a new chapter in life, like in between community, and we just moved into like our Highland Park house, and it was like the word is a double-edged sword that will split soul from spirit, mind from body, soul from spirit, and I was like, wait a second, because growing up, you know, like soul and spirit get intertwined a lot, and they're like, so it just drove me into like this huge, like researching words, researching the Hebrew, researching the Greek or the Latin, and getting into, you know, it's like the sodos and, you know, pneuma and like all the specific cardia, right? All the different words, and then like the root words that those all create, and just realizing like the matrix of language and the mathematics of it, and like the precision of it. And it got me into a place of like, cause it's talking about outside to inside. And then I saw this shape for the first time, and it was an unfolded tesseract, which is like the four-sided, you know, kind of cross. And when you fold that back into 4D, it's the hypercube, right? That eats itself, and it's looking at space in 4 dimensions. So that got me into like a whole 4-dimensional, like microspace kind of place. And it still is like a wild journey, you know. It's like delving deep into, you know, metaphysics and quantum and all these other things. And just seeing how like so much of that right now is, it's all just corroborating what like these ancients said. They just called it spirit and soul.
Is Catholicism then a part of your belief system, or it's what led you to this other type of belief? Like how does that play in, especially starting again with sort of a church that was like, we'll tell you, and then you started doing your own research,
right,
reading. How does that all play together?
I love what the original Christians wrote, called like followers of the way, right? So it's like I followed the words of Christ and Ahaya. And for me, like, it was not reciting memorized things, right? Like the big thing that was like countercultural was when he said, "My yoke is light." Before, to follow a rabbi meant you have to dedicate your whole life to memorizing the script. And he says, "My yoke is light." You know, it's like, you know, spirit, the soul and spirit within you, you know, will reverberate with the word, because the word is living. So for me, I remember when I was doing branding things and, you know, working a lot with different faith organizations, I boiled it down to like the simplest sentence, you know, that just made it so practical, right? Because again, it has to be practical. And it was like, what would you rather be doing? And I don't mean like for a couple of weeks, like, you know, skip the beach thing. You're like, yeah. Until like you get sunburned, you're done with sand, and you're like, you just want to sleep in your own bed. Like, that hammock is not that comfortable after 2 weeks. You know what I mean? Like, skip that part. Like, what would you rather be doing? And that desire, that thing that you have, you know, that's the seed of your purpose. And if you can just push to that seed and let that seed grow, it's really it's really going to absorb all the light that's meant for you. Because that is tied into your purpose, your calling, and what's going to bring that long-term gratitude and what's the word we used earlier? Fulfillment.
Do you feel part of your mission in life and to attain that fulfillment is to help people find that seed and grow that seed? And are people open to it, or people mostly resistant to it?
I think we're called to be a light. So it's to show that dream and that seed within you is alive and kicking. And those that want and yearn that will come. And it's less about, trying to get people to come to it, as opposed to like making yourself available so that when people come through it, they'll receive it. And it's been really interesting because at the beginning of our project, again, like really practical. Hey, 6 steps, 6 days, we're done, right? And that was like I was really pushing people to like really come and like try to crush it, because my whole thing is like, hey, just it's muscle memory. Just get it through your system one time before any edits, before you need to figure out why. It's like just do it. Just do it. MVP, minimum viable product. Like just do it. Get it out there. Now you have a case study that you can like pull results from. And I was like really pushing that. And then the more we did it, the more I realized like I'm growing exponentially from teaching it. Like exponentially. From last year this time to now, like on a technical level, right? Stuff is looking crazy. So now I like soften the approach of like, look, at the end of the day, facilitating this experience is making me grow so fast that it's like, it's okay. It's okay. I'm the professional artist. I'm like focused on efficiency and timelines, everything else. At the end of the day, for a lot of people, like this is, and I don't say this in a bad way or mean way at all. I mean this generally. This is a hobby, right? This is something that they do outside of what they need to do for like their basic living. This is extracurricular, right? This is extra. So let it be a hobby. Let it be a hobby that they enjoy, and let it not bring stress. Let that yoke be light. It's like, just let it be chill. So now like, the studio time is a lot more chill, where it's like, hey, we're going through this process. You're going to stumble. It's okay. It's like, and he's like, there's nothing they can do that we can't fix with 2 or 3 sprays. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Just pigment on canvas. So
whatever. Like you said, there's a balance of you can always tweak, but at one point you step back and you say, I'm done.
Well, and that's the beauty of the steps, right? It's like, hey, once you get to step 6, like you're done whenever you're like, that's good, and for a lot of students, what I'll do is like, I'll do step 6 because it's one of those where it's really nuanced, right? We're talking about reflections, highlights, and it's like a lot of math, geometry, and like all this 20 plus years of education going into like rendering light. But I'll do it more as like, it's kind of like the sword that the master gave you. It's like he shows you that last secret move, and he wants you with it, It's like, okay, I'm going to show you this last move, and then you have to figure it out. You have to figure out how to do it.
As we reflect, did your ideas, your conception of Jesus change from the younger person who had only been doing what you're supposed to do in the pews and reciting the memorized passages to opening the book for yourself and reading it? Did that change your relationship with Jesus?
There was always a hint of the hypocrisy. So I always felt that what Yeshua talked about wasn't what was said, right? Because, if you go through the New Testament, especially like the red words, like they're in strong conflict with a lot of what's going on. Homeboys turning up tables, releasing pigeons, like telling you to eat like flesh and blood, you're like, yo, that's like pagan shit. It's like, he's being like very colorful with descriptions and like intentionally like rising people up and, like calling out hypocrisy and other things. So like, I always had I was like, what Yeshua says has been well documented to be like controversial, but it was more on, what was the stance of the religiosity or the bodies that did it. At the end of the day, we're focused on the human centered portion of it. I'm really gracious with the operational side of things because, at the end of the day, it's like, hey, you go to a gym, you're expected to be a certain way. You're supposed to be clean, you're supposed to maintain, right? You go to a restaurant, you're expected to say, it's like we have all these things that we expect. And then it's no different when we come to, a building that, is helping us like deal with the week. It's like we expect these things. So like I've grown really forgiving on the different expressions of how the organization organizes.
The organization being the Catholic Church.
Church in general. Like I'm more, I would say I'm non-denominational, like for me, I can't do the ritualized call response type things.
Did you raise your children to give them your experience and say this is one to do, or did you give them more free reign to find themselves?
Well, I was pretty involved with the Catholic Church as a child, and I was on my parents' push, and I saw the value in being there and seeing those, because at the end of the day, your spirit is gonna call out to remembrance. So you never know, like what you're gonna remember, what you're gonna be able to like look back on and like hold as an anchor. So we want to make sure that they have the opportunity to meet the God that I love in the spaces that I love him. That's primarily in church, but that's also just how we live our life. So we want to be examples to that always, and they're coming along with us. They're part of our journey, and when they're adults, they can do whatever they want.
Absolutely. I'm going to switch gears now. Do you believe that human beings have separate and distinct races?
There's the human race.
There's one race. We're all one species. We're all. Do you think
you want to get into like chromosomes and blood types? It gets all crazy. But, I mean, at the end of the day, it's if we look at just from biology, right? It's like if you can procreate and have children that are fertile, then that's it. That's within nature, the wisdom of Yah's purview. If the offspring are not fertile, like a liger or like a donkey and a horse, right? Like that wasn't meant to be. So,
do you think in a world where other people identify race and racial hierarchy that they're ignoring what you just said as the obvious point of we're all humans, or do they rationalize something else to get to saying somebody is an other?
Yeah, it's more like I find that there's just bias. Like we all have bias, and your bias is going to be on the positive. It's like the things that you're familiar with, whether that's the circles you're in, the kind of cars you drive, the meals you eat, the extracurricular activities you do, the leisure, the religion, or the hue. I'm in an interesting place where like my aesthetic or my visual, my visage has always created something. even my time in Japan, it was like I had had just broken my teeth from like a bike accident, like crazy hair, like tall brown boy, and in Japan, it's like there was a lot of curiosity, because it was like so different from what they're used to. And then even now, like as vitiligo spreads, and it's like it's like like there's like spots everywhere. Like, there's always something with the visuals, and I would believe that most of it starts from an innocent curiosity, and then it really just depends on the biases that they have. So there's bias, and whatever bias fits within the individual's worldview, it's just going to be some kind of echo chamber for them. So I'm not going to put more energy into that.
You mentioned earlier when we were talking sort of about like the left brain, right brain, and also as far as people coming into their own with religion. Do you feel the same when it comes to bias and all having to live together? Like people have their biases and sometimes they're extreme and they make it so other people's lives are hard and difficult. But is it something that we just have to put up with, or is it something that is to be fought? Like what's that balance, knowing that bias can also become a hindrance for the person who is being biased against?
I love we go back to the biblical. I love Jeshua's take on it, whereas like the people in authority are the ones that need the most criticism, right? And then your neighbors are the ones that need the most grace. Because when it's a person, again, that's a bias. So you can either reinforce their bias or you can outlove it. But when it's an institution, like they need the most criticism, where you're calling out the hypocrisy, you're calling out the bigotry, you're calling out the double speaking. It's like, so there's a place for both, where it's like, hey, for our neighbor, max grace until it crosses the line of safety, right? And then it's max judgment.
I like that. and to your point, again, I believe what you are saying to be true, that grace for each other is the ultimate gift that we can
for your neighbor,
give each other.
For your neighbor, at least.
Yeah.
Like, hey, one up to the man, sure. But for your neighbor, once you get to the human, once you get to the person on the counter, like that's your neighbor, man. They're just doing their thing.
And like you said, when it crosses from, so when someone's action crosses from safe to unsafe, then their bias is no longer bias. It is now harm. And harm is something that the government has a responsibility to step in and stop.
I'll even go further, right? We have an unalienable right. No government can give us that right to protect ourselves and our family.
Perfect transition to the next question. Do you believe in liberty?
Here's the thing with freedom and liberty, right? Is that you're born free, but freedom isn't free, right? You can say whatever you want, but if you're trying to get a job in corporate, that better not have a digital trail. Because if that misaligns with their corporate ethos, you're not hireable to them, right? So there's consequences to our freedom. So how can you express your freedom with integrity so you're not, hurting others or misaligning your intentions?
I think there's a common idea of artists as being free and outside of the box that the rest of us are in. But do you feel that even as a professional artist, you're still somewhat in that box of having to meet those expectations, or do you have more free reign?
Maybe a year ago, I would have answered different. But going from a solo artist to a group artist was a huge jump, because now, as somebody who's leading the team, you're held to more responsibility, more even tone, temper. It's like more predictable. And then going from group artist to like immediately thrust into like a public arts artist is that now we're touching into like taxpayer dollars and neighborhoods, and it's unfortunately there is a lot of politics that gets intertwined when you get into the public sphere, because not so much the policy, but there's a lot of different perspectives, right? So gotta just be real tempered with how you speak to people, just be honorable, respectful, and it's okay as an artist. Like, you'll get mad or whatever, but at the end of the day, it's like, gotta still put on your professional hat and realize that in a way you're now becoming a public figure, not in the like crazy viral way, but you're out in public interacting with a community, with the support of the city and different organizations. So now whatever you're doing is reflecting on that. So, it's more responsibility and more weight on your actions, and, bigger scope on what you're doing. So there's more to think about and more to consider. And again, I'm not 100% free. I just understand the consequences of my actions. So I have to, come in, I'll say it this way, it's a little colorful, but it's like, you have to walk in like as a king, understanding, properties and, lines and it's like understanding like all the things that are going on, and make sure that you're, a good ambassador for, the treaties and relationships that you have, that you're working with.
And you've noticed a real difference in I guess we're approaching 100 days since Trump's second inauguration. It is affecting your life, or how you walk through at least that professional portion of it.
My part, not as much, except like the communities for sure. With the communities, it's like a lot of unknowns. It's a lot of unknowns right now. One of the things that I remember my parents like instilled in me was, again, back to integrity of hard work. It's like, look, if you're working hard and you got a dream, at the end of the day, America wants the best. So, like, this is going to sound like super insensitive. You just have to become the best. So sounds really
your
insensitive.
Best, not right, your best, right?
It's like, no, like the best. You're the best at you. It's like, you have to become your best, I guess. But I like, like, just keep it, let it be a little sizzle. It's like, you just have to become the best, and that means the best isn't even that hard, because the best is a category where it's like, if you're in the top 50 or in the top 49%, you're in the best. So are you doing 1% more than mediocre?
That drive. As people do that drive, and some of them strive and become the best, sometimes people become super wealthy. Sometimes even doing the best and being the best, you don't end up super wealthy, hopefully fulfilled.
Right.
Do you believe that greed is good?
It's funny. I actually have a prayer that I've been doing, because I'm big on transmuting these negatively charged words to light. So here's my answer to that. I want to be so greedy that everyone around me flourishes. I want to be so selfish that everyone around me prospers. I want to be so bold-headed that everyone behind me can move forward. So yeah, I think greed is awesome with that mindset. You know?
Yes. No, and the flip is what you said. Your as your being is taking in really everything. It's the dark to light is your constant journey. Which means you still have to recognize the dark, right? You've recognized the dark to get.
Hey, I'm greedy. I'm a greedy person. Okay, well, I'm going to be greedy. Let me be this greedy. Like, not that I get an extra few zeros, and not that I get another car in my garage. I'm going to be so greedy that it can't help but my neighborhood get better.
Which is what you're spending your time doing, right? Yeah. That is how you spend your time today. Do you think that excessive wealth is good?
I've transmitted the same way. Yeah.
Do you think that billionaires and centimillionaires earn all of their wealth?
We don't earn any of it. We position ourselves to acquire.
Do you think that the system we have right now, where a artist, an activist like yourself working pays a percentage of their income and their wealth in taxes that is far less than the percentage that those billionaires and centimillionaires pay? Do you feel that's a fair system, or is that a system worth changing? Or do you not think about it at all?
No. Early on, I got connected with like a really dope accountant. Shout out. I don't know if he wants to be public, so I won't say it. But, you know, at the end of the day, like the way the tax structure was created, it is, okay, let's move back. The way everything's created is so that private, like the government doing stuff is way slower than if a private company did it, for the most part. So it's like, how much can the private sector take from the government having to do it? And at the end of the day, that's what, you know, tax incentives are. And I know this is like super businessy and da-da-da. And, you know, and again, if you never dealt with taxes in that way, or like saw it from that light, this is like a really good perspective. It's like, hey, what service can I provide that would alleviate the government from having to provide it? So you structure your entity in that way, you know, whether it's an S corp or C corp. And I say those two because, you know, it's like maximum protection of your private and, you know, maximum benefit from this alleviation that you're doing for the government. So me personally, like, I have these systems set up so that, you know, all the work that I'm doing, you know, a majority of it is focused on, a majority of what I do and what I expense is focused on that. So, you know, I'm reaping in the benefits of providing the service and alleviating the government from doing that. And that comes across as tax breaks, as write-offs, as you name it. If I were doing this as a W-2, it's like, yeah, that's the worst position you'd be in. But this is the difference, right? Because it goes back to the freedom thing. It's like, I'm exercising more of my freedoms, but with that comes all the responsibility of keeping my budget, right? Of acquiring my next client, of acquiring my next job. You know, it's like, I have to do all that paperwork and I have to do all that documentation. Again, going back to the analogy, it's like, I need to walk in as a king or ruler that has my documentation in place, has my schedules and my everything else. When you're W-2, you know, at the end of the day, it's like, you have the freedom to not think about it. So that means somebody else is doing it. And who's doing it? The government's doing it. So you haven't alleviated anything from them. You've given them more work. So you're going to get taxed more because the government's doing it. You can get an accountant to do the same thing that the government's doing, and you'll get more money back, and you have an LLC, S Corp, C Corp that's taking the brunt of like whatever it is you're doing because you've taken the reins on that, on your finances at the end of the day. So if you're a W-2 employee, you don't have the responsibility. You don't have the weight of like the tax code and audits and all this other stuff. And you just put in a W-2, what was my donations for the year, and you're good. You know, it's like, you got that freedom. Like, so it's like, you're exercising the freedom of joy and like free time, you know? Like, I'm over here, like, it's April 15th, and I need to like get my taxes in and all that, you know? So, you know, so it's like, yeah, they're paying less money, but you're paying less time.
As a business owner, though, and if you compare your business, what it has to pay in taxes, and it's still a percentage, do you think that a Amazon or a Google should pay a minimum percentage? Or if they find that right accountant who can get it to zero, which they seem to often do, is that okay? Like, even like you said, there's that W-2, but then there's small business, which isn't the same as a giant corporation. You have things at your disposal over the W-2 person, but you still don't have as much at your disposal as a Google. And in that, does it bother you? Do you think about it?
Yeah, the scales are crazy. You know, it's like just me, like leading a little group. You know, it's like you go, you know, it's like just my squad going to painting. I know that I'm gonna probably bring like $100 of revenue to the little corner store, and you know, maybe more in that week. You know what I mean? Like, I know that me doing that, like this lift company and this paint company and this paint, you know. So it's like on the pragmatic side, it's like, yeah, man, the big guys, like just them having an office there, every restaurant in the 2-mile radius is going to get a jump in everything else. And that's why they're getting all these tax breaks and everything else. So, you know, it's like a really convoluted thing. It's like, you know, the scales are crazy. And, you know, there's definitely abuse and all these other things. But at the end of the day, it's like, what's the heart behind it, or what's the impetus behind it? And it's knowing that, hey, a Google is going to bring in, you know, thousands of new apartment purchases, or, you know, groceries, stores, shops. It's going to bring in a lot of revenue, and indirectly, that is the reason for the break or the benefit.
The community that you're working in right now in Cleveland, are they fearful? Are they hopeful? What is that sort of, as you do your work to bring light, what do you feel your community is feeling?
Well, you know, as humans, we're always in that flux and in between. You know, there's, you know, some of the communities we're in have been historically unattended, you know, ignored even. And it's gotten to a thing where, you know, you hear politicians say such and such over and over, and you don't see anything happen. But what was really cool, we got to do our first mural last month after going through like design reviews and all that. And, you know, the community was really supportive, showed so much love. Like, even at night when we were like painting in the dark, we had the neighbors come by and bring some lights for us to hook up. You know, and the overwhelming sentiment was, you know, it's cool to finally like see a seed of the promise that was made come into fruition. So I think it did, and it is bringing hope to community, you know, tangible hope that they can see every day, you know, bring color to the neighborhood. And, you know, at the end of the day, also reflect a lot of what they've asked for. You know, so we go through and make sure that we're aligning with the people and the owners or the business owners of the buildings that we're touching and the lots that we're touching, so that we can tell a story that synergizes with our vision and their experience.
What is some of that story that the community is longing to and happy to be now telling?
Resilience and steadfastness at the end of the day. It's like just enduring and finally seeing the bloom. They call it our garden. It's like it really is a really great through line and symbol of this fertile ground, that's been toiled, that's gone through hardships and gone through the rumbling and churning, and finally we're starting to see some of the foliage come out. Springtime, baby.
Beautiful, and continued good luck with that. And I'm excited that wherever there is more light is always a beautiful thing. I'm going to ask my final 3 questions. They kind of start out with a big circle and they end in a tiny circle, which is you. Ariel, if you could give your fellow Americans one thing, spiritually, economically, socially, culturally, in their hearts, in their minds, souls, spirits, what is that one thing that you would give to your fellow Americans if you could just do that?
There's this cool little song that we kind of made up, and it's Volteate del Rincón. It's like turn away from the corner. And what that is, a lot of times the shadow, the darkness that we see, all we can see is this darkness. And a lot of times we just turned around. We realize that this darkness that we're seeing is actually the shadow of the immense light of blessing that's shining on your life. You're just going the wrong way. If you turn around, you realize that the light's the other way. And that shadow is you. It's a silhouette of you blocking the light. And just turn around. Just turn around. All you're seeing is shadow. Turn around. You're going the wrong way.
I like it. It is a beautiful gift, and I hope more and more of us take it. I know I will make sure as I lift my head up to make sure that I am not looking at my own shadow, but finding the light. It's nice. If you could do the same for the people of Storer Avenue in your neighborhood in Cleveland, or even all of Cleveland, if you could give your neighbors one thing, what is that one thing that you wish you could give them?
We're giving it now. It's like sharing our gifts. Like that thing that like we talked about earlier, the seed within you. What would I rather be doing? Like I'm doing what I'd rather be doing. And unfortunately, because it's the public art side of things, like it comes with a lot of paperwork and other things I'd rather not be doing. But it lets me do the thing I'd rather be doing. We're there, and I'm just super grateful to have the opportunity to share with everyone that comes in contact with the art as it's going up, and even through the planning process and beforehand. So maybe it's more the question is like, hey, what would you rather be doing? How can you even dedicate 2 hours a week to it so that it can really build this creation power within you, and really let this little seed flourish into something beautiful. 2 hours a week, becomes 104 minutes a year. You can do some damage with 100 minutes or 100 hours. I mean,
if you could give yourself one thing today, spiritually, economically, culturally, in your own life, in your own heart, spirit, what is that one thing that you would give to yourself?
I've been messing with the idea of doing things for future me. Right. I've been siphoning from future me. Like I'll envision where I would be, and then I'm like reverse engineer it so that I can be there. Like how can I bless future me, and finding ways to do that through, on the practical side of the business things, and just creating good systems and structures so that I don't have to be doing the things I don't want to be doing or rather be doing. But also, like the little silly emotional things like, hey, I want to put $20 in a jacket I'm not going to wear till next winter, so that come that time, like, yo, $20, let's get some smoothies.
When future you and present you collide, is present you usually happy with future you? Or
well, I'm trying to make him more happy,
and that fulfillment.
Bring that way is like when you look back in the past, it's also a dopamine rush, Like, I like that guy.
Ariel, I like that guy. And thank you for talking to me and sharing what motivates you, your thoughts on, or sharing your beliefs and how they came about, how they've changed. I appreciate it. Thank you for joining me here on the podcast.
All right. You're welcome, sir. Thank you for the invitation.
Ariel works hard to find fulfillment, but never makes the work a chore. With a little work, your seed of fulfillment can also blossom into something beautiful and truly yours. I am grateful for Ariel sharing the morals, ethics, religious beliefs, and views on humanity that informs his approach to culture, politics, and government. I am excited to always be bringing you more of this content. Please consider supporting this work and becoming a paying member at $8 per month by visiting weunitewewin.com. Come back for the next episode to find out our next stop in user-generated America. No fear, only love.